Imagine waking up in a small, dark attic room. 6 or 7 people are packed around you. The window barely opens, and the air smells of coal smoke and damp brick walls. This isn't a nightmare. It's everyday life for millions of people in the 1880s America. And here's a shocking fact. 1 in every 10 children born in New York during this era never made it to their 5th birthday. Today, we're taking a journey back in time. You'll step into a world where survival was never guaranteed, where the American dream was forged in poverty, disease, and hard labor. But here's the twist. You carry all your 21st century knowledge with you, while living with 19th century limitations. So the real question is, with everything you know now about health, business, and community, would you simply survive, or could you truly make a difference? Let's find out. 1. Daily survival in 1880s. America, more than just work and food. Your first morning in New York, 1883. No alarm clock, just the factory whistle shrieking at 5 a.m. Everyone rushes to splash their faces in a shared water basin. What they don't know, that water has likely mixed with sewage from the street, and yet they drink it. At the time, most people believed disease came from bad air. They burned incense, they hung herbs by the window, they even stuffed rags under doors. But germs? Bacteria? That was crazy science to them. You, however, know the truth. You boil water. You cover food. You wash your hands before eating. Neighbors may laugh. You're wasting time and coal. But you're quietly protecting yourself from cholera, typhoid, and dysentery. And food? A working-class diet was painfully bland. Bread, potatoes, a bit of salted meat. Many children developed rickets from vitamin deficiencies. That's where your modern mindset kicks in. Maybe you strike a deal with a pushcart vendor to trade laundry service for fresh apples and cabbage. Maybe you start a small rooftop garden. Nothing fancy, but enough to add greens to your family's diet. What you know is common sense today. Boiling water, eating vegetables, was revolutionary then. In fact, doctors often warned against too much fresh fruit, believing it upset the stomach. You'd look like an oddball, until the day everyone else got sick and you didn't. Lesson? Survival isn't just endurance, it's adaptation. The smallest daily choices could be the difference between life and death. So once you've managed to stay healthy, the next battle begins. How do you actually earn enough to survive in a city where even children are sent to the factories? 2. Turning struggle into opportunity. Jobs, money, and community factories were the default. 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, $1.50 a day. You'd come home exhausted, with cotton dust in your lungs or burns on your arms. But here's where your modern brain sees something different. Unmet demand. Families too tired to cook? You could sell ready-made meals. No electricity? Candles and kerosene lamps were always in demand. Overwhelmed mothers with too many kids? Laundry and childcare services were lifelines. Jacob Riis documented in How the Other Half Lives how some immigrants escaped the factory system by starting tiny street businesses, food stalls, shoemaking, tailoring. These weren't glamorous, but they gave families control over their time. In the 1880s, the gig economy already existed. It just looked like peddlers with pushcarts and seamstresses with sewing machines. And you, with modern efficiency and customer service, could outpace them. Common mistake. Back then, many families put every working member, even children, into the factory system. Short-term gain, long-term misery. Families that diversified, having one member run a side hustle while others worked, often fared better. And there's another advantage you have: networking. Immigrants stuck to their ethnic enclaves, Irish with Irish, Italians with Italians. But you know that collaboration across cultures creates opportunity. Imagine an Irish laborer, a German carpenter, and an Italian cook pooling resources to open a tavern. That's more powerful than any one family alone. Lesson? Opportunity isn't always in the obvious path. It's in the overlooked needs of people and in building networks that others ignore. But even if you build a small business, it won't matter if disease knocks you, or your customers, out of the game. And in the 1880s, illness was the deadliest competitor of all. 3. Playing the long game. Health, innovation, and legacy diseases killed more Americans than workplace accidents ever did. Tuberculosis alone claimed 1 in 7 lives. Typhoid and yellow fever swept through crowded cities. Doctors prescribed opium syrup, arsenic pills, or mercury tonics. But you know fresh air, sunlight, and nutrition actually work. You open windows for ventilation. You convince families to spend time outdoors, even if it means standing on a crowded fire escape. Real example, Dr. Edward Trudeau, in 1884, discovered that TB patients in the Adirondack Mountains improved dramatically with fresh air. His findings took decades to spread, but you could accelerate that knowledge. In the 1880s, America promoting hygiene could be seen as strange or even superstitious. Washing hands before meals? Doctors themselves rarely did it. You'd be pushing against the culture, not just the disease. But beyond survival, you see the bigger picture. America is transforming. Railroads crisscross the country. Steel and oil are exploding industries. Electricity is creeping into homes. While most workers focus only on today's wages, you know where the future is headed. Maybe you buy land near a new railroad line, knowing it will skyrocket in value. Maybe you invest in steel, or simply offer services that feed the industrial machine. Moral dilemma? Do you exploit this foresight to get rich alone, or do you share it, creating a cooperative credit union so your neighbors can invest too? And then there's education. The most successful families weren't necessarily the richest. They were the ones who kept their kids in school. Andrew Carnegie went from factory boy to steel tycoon, and his greatest legacy wasn't money. It was libraries that educated millions. Lesson: real survival isn't about tonight's meal or tomorrow's paycheck. It's about planting seeds, health, education, community that will bear fruit 10, 20 years later. Which leaves us with the ultimate question. If you had this chance, what kind of legacy would you leave behind in the 1880s America? Walking through a single day in 1880s, America shows us something powerful. People didn't just survive on food or wages. They survived on hope. In cramped tenements, families gathered around a single candle, telling stories, singing songs, and passing on the belief in a better tomorrow. That hope was their greatest act of resistance against a system stacked against them. And that's the real lesson for us today. Resilience isn't just enduring hardship. It's keeping your humanity, your kindness, and your connections to others, especially when life is at its hardest. So, if you woke up tomorrow in 1883, what would you do with your 21st century knowledge? Would you scrape by? Or become the one who plants hope for generations to come? Drop your survival strategy in the comments. I read every one, and I may feature your ideas in a future episode. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. Because next week, we're heading to another turning point in history. And trust me, it's one you don't want to miss. Imagine this. You wake up, open the cabin door, and a blast of icy wind almost knocks you over. The year isn't 2025. It's 1886, the deadliest winter on the American frontier. Your firewood is almost gone. The snowdrifts are higher than your roof, and survival isn't guaranteed. But what if you, yes, you, could bring today's knowledge back in time to outsmart the cold? 1. The deadliest winter on the frontier. The winter of 1886 to 87 wasn't just cold. It was catastrophic. Temperatures plunged to minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Blizzards buried entire towns, and cattle herds froze standing up, their bodies forming walls of ice across the plains. Imagine stepping outside and seeing thousands of lifeless animals where your wealth once stood. Families like the Johnsons in Nebraska faced nights when frost crept through cabin walls and water froze solid inside kitchen pots. Neighbors only miles apart lived completely different fates. Some endured, others never saw spring. Here's the lesson. Nature doesn't negotiate. Those who survived weren't necessarily the strongest, but the most resourceful. They understood how to stretch supplies, share warmth, and adapt when plans failed. And this is where you have the edge. With modern knowledge in your back pocket, you'd already know strategies they couldn't dream of. Which brings us to the next key. How to hack frontier survival with techniques 140 years ahead of their time. Second, modern knowledge versus frontier struggles. Now picture this. You're back in 1886, but you've brought with you the wisdom of the 21st century. While your neighbors pile on buffalo hides, you know the secret of layered insulation, trapping air pockets to create warmth. With just wool, straw, and animal pelts, you can mimic the principle behind modern winter jackets. You'd also improvise a solar heat collector, dark stones placed under cabin windows to absorb the weak daylight and release it through the night. To others, it looks like simple rocks. To you, it's life-saving science. But the real advantage? Recognizing hypothermia. While many settlers mistook shivering for strength, you'd know it's the body's final alarm. By teaching your family emergency warming techniques, skin-to-skin heat sharing, heated stones rotated through bedding, you'd not only survive, but inspire others around you. And it's here we find one unforgettable story. 3. Lessons from survivors and your role in history. Take Mary Johnson, a homesteader who saved her children by heating stones in the fire and tucking them into their beds each night. She didn't have survival guides or thermal blankets, just grit, instinct, and creativity. Her small act became a model others followed, proving that even the simplest tools could rewrite fate. If you stood beside her, armed with today's knowledge, imagine how many more families could have made it through that winter. You wouldn't just be surviving. You'd be a lifeline, turning tragedy into resilience for an entire community. That's the true lesson of the frontier. Survival is never about facing nature alone, but about how your ingenuity can protect the people around you. And the question remains, if history threw you into that frozen storm tomorrow, would you rise as one of its survivors or one of its stories? And remember, every era of history had storms, struggles, and impossible odds. But armed with the right knowledge, you could be the difference between life and death. If you want more time travel survival guides, lessons that turn the past into your secret advantage for the future, hit subscribe and join me on the next journey through history.